Hi, I'm Will Bruin, and I was just recognized as a Seattle Sounders legend. Now I get to do voice reads for the Sounder at Heart podcast network.
Here we go. Come on! Hey, O'Shan! Let's go!
The Seattle Sounders have done it! MLS Cup winners!
Here comes Rui Diaz through the middle to crown it for Seattle!
The Sounders rule the region!
Seattle Sounders is campeón!
All creatures great and small! De la Vega! ¡No me pongo de pie! ¡De rodillas!
You know, what was the thought process in terms of who you decided to use and who you didn't?
Ever since Sounder at Heart wrote a commentary that we didn't take Leagues Cup seriously.
This episode of Nos Arietes is sponsored by Full Pull Wines, a Seattle-based wine retailer and proud sponsor of Nos Arietes since 2011. Full Pull was founded in 2009, is based in Seattle, and is owned and operated by longtime Sounders supporters. They offer the best boutique wines of the world to members of their mailing list, with special focus on their home, the Pacific Northwest. Welcome back to another episode of Nos Arietes on the Sounder at Heart podcast network. It's Friday. I'm Jeremiah Shan. As always, I am joined by Niko Morano, my good buddy from Pulso Sports, Lobbing Scorchers, Soccer Down here, and of course, Sounder at Heart. Welcome, Niko. Kind of crazy
Jeremiah.
having this time off. Yeah.
It really is. I've been, I probably should be way more productive with this 5 days that Brian gave us off. But maybe I haven't, but it's been nice to just maybe do other things. I've been able to kind of wind down from, all of the hecticness. Had my son down here for the weekend, which was nice. Obviously came to watch the game. So it's all kind of simmering down now, and I'm trying to prepare myself for the last bit of MLS play and then playoffs, of course.
Yeah. It's been kind of a nice respite in some ways. I have been busy. I've been pumping out content and getting stuff edited and whatnot, but it's just like there's less pressure when you don't have to go to training every day and you don't have to, like, I actually am able to less driving. That's for sure. And kind of nice because the kids started school this week. And then my wife got COVID. So my wife is, I mean, whatever. It's the way it is in the world now,
That's
so
right.
So I was getting the kids out of the house solo today, but that's sometimes just how it goes.
Hey, man, sometimes you gotta just next man up, right?
Exactly. Next man up. Exactly. That's exactly right. So we are recording on, like I said, Friday afternoon, literally minutes after the Leagues Cup issued suspensions for the incident, the post-game incident. 3 Miami players get suspended. 1 Sounders staffer gets suspended. I'll run it down for you. So Luis Suarez gets 6 games. Tomas Aviles gets 3 games. Sergio Busquets gets 2 games. And Steven Lenhart, who I think a lot of people are still learning that Steven Lenhart, we have talked about him at various times, maybe not extensively, but Steven Lenhart, yes, Steven Lenhart. Yeah, that Steven Lenhart is, as far as I know, an employee of the Sounders. He is at training almost every day. He works with the teams. He's not technically the team psychiatrist because he is not a licensed psychiatrist, but he does work with the psychology aspect of the team. And the players seem to love him. And you can kind of see partly why, because in the post game, he was not afraid. Like, there's not a lot of team psychiatrists who are team psychologists. Maybe that's right.
Yeah, I've been heard of him referred to as the mental health coach. Don't know how.
Okay, that's a good. I like
official
that.
that is. How
that's a good label.
but that's what I've heard from players and stuff.
Yeah, that makes sense.
That's what they see him as.
he has a background in sports psychology. Like I said, I don't think he does not have a medical degree, so you have to be kind of careful with what you actually call him. But yes, mental health coach is a great title. I hope that's actually his coach, because I like that. But not a lot of mental health coaches you would see getting in the middle of a full-blown brawl and throwing people around and maybe even throwing a punch or two. But I think that's sort of part of why players love him, I think, because he's still like one of the guys in some ways.
Yeah, 100%, especially when the situation finds you. You didn't find the situation, right?
No.
I mean, you were kind of placed there. And initially, I think he's trying to remove people, but things escalated very quickly. And once you're involved in it, well, I guess you just got to respond. But yes, he's definitely a guy that is a not just player, but like an organization fave around the facility.
Yeah. And so he gets the brunt of the suspension from the Leagues Cup. Honestly, it's effectively a slight, there's a fine that I'm sure won't feel great, but suspending the mental health coach for 5 games from Leagues Cup is like very much a optics kind of thing. It doesn't really have a big impact on anything. But what's the shoe that has not yet dropped, and this is what people really care about, is what's going to happen in league play, because the reality is that there's a chance that Luis Suarez will never have a chance to serve this 6-game suspension, that Sergio Busquets will never have a chance to serve his 2-game suspension. And what people want to know is there going to be sanctions in league play? Because this is stuff that's where this is really the rubber's going to really hit the road if the league is going to take a position. And I think I'll let you say what you've been able to report out, but I have confirmed that the league office is not taking the position that they lack jurisdiction, meaning the league recognizes that they have the ability to make punishments, and that could be fines, that could be suspensions, that could be some other creative punishment, but they understand that the CBA, they're not hiding behind the idea that this is the Leagues Cup and our hands are tied, we can't do anything. So I sort of reading between the lines, to me, it looks like this was the first shoe, and now the players can appeal any league punishment. They have my suspicion is they have already been informed of what's going to happen. They are going to appeal that. Maybe that gets changed, maybe it doesn't. But I feel very safe in saying that I would be shocked, totally shocked, if Suarez plays against the Sounders on September 16th, which would mean that he's going to get at least a 2-game ban. I would think Busquets and Aviles will also get suspended. I don't know how much the book will be thrown at them, but Suarez is clearly the sort of alpha villain in this whole situation, and him spitting on Gene Ramirez is gotten the most attention. It is the most cowardly and despicable thing, frankly, that happened in all those. I can live with Sergio Busquets throwing a sucker punch. That's weak, but like whatever. Like, these are grown men, and if they want to handle their problems like children, I guess that's one thing. But what Luis Suarez did is sort of like more beyond the pale of, this is just disrespectful human to human type stuff. The league cannot just condone that, and they can't just look the other way. But what are you hearing? I've said enough.
No, I reached out to sources within the Leagues Cup organization, and I've talked to more than one person. I've talked to a couple of sources within MLS, and from Leagues Cup organization, or the body of Leagues Cup, what I was told is that, to their knowledge, there is nothing that restrains MLS from bypassing or multi-league suspension.
Mm-hmm.
I forget the word that they use, but it's basically carried it over between what happened in Leagues Cup to MLS. I've also was told by another source that this would be particularly true if Inter Miami decides to set an internal disciplinary action toward mainly Luis Suarez because of the vile and unsportsmanlike action that he had against Jim Ramirez. Anytime that you set a statement saying this player's actions do not condone with our view of the sport or our view of our club, the same, honestly, copy and paste sort of statement that you hear from clubs, they mean nothing if there is no backing from a disciplinary action from that club. So that would be the easiest way for something to uphold within MLS, because once you discipline the player internally, MLS would obviously abide by it, and it would make it much more straightforward. But from the league, I've heard that there's still some investigating to do. Now, this was a day ago or so. So, I'm a little bit behind in terms of who I talked to in the league, but showing precedent that there have been other actions and moments where players have been suspended in multiple leagues, tournaments, and MLS. I would be shocked if that wasn't the decision from MLS. I would be disappointed in Inter Miami by not adding to that very vague statement that they put out already, by using some sort of, disciplinary penalties upon, if not just Luis Suarez, I would also add Sergio Busquets in that, simply because he's the one that engages Obed Vargas, just plain and simple, and uses a closed fist and hits him in the chin. There was a lot of slapping around, which I'm not condoning either, obviously from Toto and Cello. But I think that the two real big ones for me are Sergio and Luis Suarez.
Right. Yeah. I was a little surprised, though, that Maxi Falcone was not part of the
you're
sort
right.
of the
forgot about Maxi.
A part of this initial suspension. He was pretty involved in a lot of this. Weingart is another player who seemed to be pretty involved. I don't want to get into a tit for tat here. I suppose on the Sounders side, if they really wanted to go after Sounders players, to sort of even this out, for lack of a better term, they could potentially go after Jackson Reagan or Cody Baker or even John Bell. I tend to see, I think any reasonable person sees what happens here and understands that the Sounders were retaliating. They were defending themselves oftentimes, that this was not something that was initiated by the Sounders, that this is almost entirely the Miami players being the aggressors and being the instigators and the ones who seem to be really itching for a fight. I don't quite understand the thought process behind what the Miami players are hoping to accomplish by, okay, you want to smack talk and you want to talk your trash and you want to sort of bring these kids down or whatever you want to do. Okay, fine. But I really watching it all. I don't understand how it raises to the level of punches being thrown and people spitting and all this kind of stuff that feels very just unbecoming, for lack of a better term. These are old pros, these are people who have been there and done that. And this has been discussed a fair amount, but I suppose the idea that this was beneath Miami in terms of this competition or this league, all that sort of goes out the window, because clearly these guys are invested and they care.
Yeah. What I would add to that maybe hasn't been said enough is that if I was defending the Sounders, let's say I was pleading a case, I would say that the actions by Sounder players are that of any security guard or anyone that has been trained to remove or detain somebody from escalating further action. So the Sounders weren't necessarily engaging in a fist fight. They were pulling players off of others.
Right.
They were, I saw Stephen Fry, I saw Freddie Juarez holding people down. There's a difference between retaliation physically in terms of punches back and forth and just trying to defend yourself, trying to defend somebody else, but by removing him from them, right? You saw Marco Andrade going around with his big paws, trying to move people around. That is very different than them just going back and forth. I said this on the Lines show. If the Sounder players had engaged into a fist fight, which by all means would have been very easy to do, because you could say you're defending yourself. I've been punched, I need to punch back. I think it would have escalated a lot more than it did. And it would have been up to a potential of a malice at the palace sort of situation, where if there's that sort of fist fighting and kicks and things of the nature, maybe the fans get involved. Maybe people are jumping the stands. I mean, it could have escalated to proportions that I cannot imagine. So regardless of how it is portrayed, I have been very vocal about giving the Sounder players a lot of credit for being mature about how they approach that brawl, rather than allowing your hood to come out or your manliness or all this and you're fist fighting somebody. Because I guarantee you that it would have been a lot worse than it really was.
I totally agree with you. And I think that that's one thing that maybe the Sounders haven't generally gotten enough credit for in this whole situation is their self-control. And again, this idea, I think it's funny, not to like bring it here, but it is sort of funny because one of the things that we've been talking about for the last few months is how is there a self-control problem with the Sounders because of all these red cards and whatnot. And I really think that this is an illustration of how that isn't what's going on here. Like, this is not an issue where players can't control themselves. It's mostly a situation of weird circumstances that have led to a bunch of red cards that are sort of isolated incidents. And I think that if you had a team full of hotheads who are just looking to, who were ready to pop off at the first sign of distress, that this would have been, you would have seen it here. You would have seen them losing their mind and you would have seen guys just going crazy. And that's not at all what happened. In fact, you saw a lot of, like you said, you saw a lot of self-control. You saw a lot of maturity. You saw a lot of players who were trying to de-escalate the situation. And honestly, one of the things that's remarkable about this is how few both Miami players and coaches were not doing almost anything to de-escalate this situation. And it is sort of straight. It does look like a inmates running the asylum type of situation where, Busquets and Messi and Suarez sort of play by their own rules and they kind of get to dictate how things go. And the coaches and staff are sort of just along for the ride. And maybe they implement some control over some of the other guys, although the way it looked like there were players who didn't even get into the game who wanted action on this. So it to me strikes me as a completely out of control situation that maybe brings up some bigger issues about entitlement and about allowing certain personalities to just sort of like run a team, because right now that's sort of what this looks like.
And that's exactly why I really do think that if not MLS as the entity, Inter Miami in some sort of way should uphold some of these sanctions, some of these infractions. I think that it's very easy for Inter Miami or MLS to suspend Luis Suarez for the rest of the regular season. It's not like those knees couldn't take a break anyways. So,
sure.
It could be very simple for you to really make people believe that you are not condoning that sort of behavior, because Luis Suarez has the rap sheet of a hoodlum, from spitting on people, biting multiple people, which that alone should like really make you raise your eyebrows. racial slurs, a lot of racial slurs, some that have been found out, some that have not. So he's been suspended doesn't mean that he hasn't been involved in others. And vulgar actions to fans. So this is a guy who that's who he is. That is Luis Suarez. He's a disgusting human being. He's a great player, but he is a awful human being. And we all know that as a club that is signing a player, you know what he comes with. You
Right.
know who he is, man. So if
Right.
you really want to say we don't condone it, that is not who we are as an organization, then have the pants to suspend the player and discipline and let him know, not in this house. No, you don't. But I'd be very disappointed if that's not the case. Would I be surprised? Not necessarily, because you don't want to ruffle the feathers of one Lionel Messi, but it really is a thing of whether you mean what you say and say what you mean.
Yeah. And it's too, but it is funny that the Sounders sort of seem to have dodged a bullet a little when they, it was pretty well reported that the Sounders at least made some effort to sign Luis Suarez a few years ago. And it's very, honestly lucky that it didn't happen. And I don't know how much effort they really put into it. It may have been sort of a cursory effort. Garth Logaway maybe makes a phone call and says, "Hey, Niko would really like you to play here," but it didn't happen. So thank God, really. But I don't know what to expect at this point. My inkling is to think that we won't hear anything until Monday, although I suppose it's possible that the league could issue something tonight or even tomorrow. I don't know when. Like the players have 48 hours to respond in an appeal to the league. If the league, my suspicion is the league has already informed Suarez and Miami about what they're intending to do, and now they have to let the appeal process play out. And honestly, I don't blame the league for not announcing anything before the appeals process is played out, because you want the appeals process to have the air of legitimacy. And the only way it looks legitimate is if you haven't already sort of announced the punishment before the appeals process plays through. That's just a matter of legality, I think. So at this point, I feel a lot better about where things stand than I did yesterday, where there did seem to be some question as to what might happen here. Especially you hear enough people repeated enough times that, well, this happened in Leagues Cup, so MLS doesn't really have jurisdiction. You start to wonder. And like I read the CBA to me reads very clear that the commissioner, not the disciplinary committee, let's be clear, this is the league office. This is
good point.
Outside of the disciplinary committee purview, but it is not outside of the purview of, this is something that is sort of considered extra beyond the normal run of play. Like the Danny Masovsky thing where let's be real, he lightly bumps the referee. It's wrong. He deserves the suspension he gets, but he doesn't do something that's beyond the pale of what you expect to see in a soccer game. And I think what separates this is not normal soccer stuff. This is something else. This is something bigger. This is something that does, frankly, harm the integrity of the league. It harms the image of the league, and the commissioner and the league office have an absolute duty to not make it look like that a player like Luis Suarez is sort of just above it all and can do whatever he wants.
And actually, the fact that Luis Suarez has put a bigger light on the whole thing,
Yes.
because he's such a global star. He's such a controversial star. And that's exactly why, I love Brian Schmetzer. I love what he said, that he didn't want this to be the story. But in Spanish or Latin America, we always say that you cannot cover the sun with one hand. The story was so much brighter, was so much bigger than anything that could have done that. It's sad. It really is sad, because I've seen more coverage in TUDN, ESPN Deportes, Fox, ESPN about the fact that Luis Suarez has this rap sheet of incidents as an awful human being, and the fact that he's being allowed to carry himself like that in the world of soccer. And, the Sergio Busquets apparently has had other sort of incidents as well. So that's been the story. And it is sad that it kind of overshadows what really happened here with the Sounders. But I will feel better if all the coverage leads to Luis Suarez being hit both financially and with some suspensions.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree with you there. So the other sort of controversy that has been simmering is what Leo Messi may have said to Sounders. Alan Gordon on the MLS Journeyman podcast basically broke the news that that Messi told Pedro de la Vega, basically, you're never going to play for the national team as long as I'm there. And whether or not, and I think to me, I don't really doubt that Messi said that or comparably other really bad stuff. I think the real question is this normal banter, or is this something where he actually is doing what he said he's doing? I'm skeptical that Messi cares enough about Pedro de la Vega to actually use his power to keep Pedro from getting onto the national team.
So there's a couple of points here. Okay, first of all, I obviously did some digging around. I haven't yet even posted it on X or any of my social media because I don't really know how much it really does, right? I don't know how big it really is because I think it's normal that me asking those close to Pedro de la Vega's circle and, doing some digging around, that the reaction is no. Messi didn't say that, right? Messi would never say that to me, that it's not here nor there. But then there's
Pedro does not want to be involved in this.
Pedro doesn't want to be involved in this, right?
Understandably.
But I'm going to take people at their word, right? So I'm going to say that all the sourcing that I've done has led to not confirming that he's already been said, that you mentioned.
Okay.
What I would say is that I could speculate that Pedro did say that there was a lot of things said with Messi, but those are things that stay on the field. He said that right after the game, right? Oh, that's just things that happen in the field, and you say things that you don't mean, right? So was it said in a moment of heat and frustration by Messi? That's very possible. I mean, if I'm the GOAT and I know that I can say, Jeremiah, if you continue to challenge me on things that I say, you will never, ever get on a podcast in your life again. Right. I'm going to finish your career today. You're going to be like, oh, shit, maybe I got to just chill out, right? So it is something that someone could say to simmer someone down who's been a pain in my ass the whole game, someone that was very influential throughout the game, just to get him off that game, get him off his mental state, right? So even afterwards, even after it's all done, right, you're still upset that you just lost, that you just got 3-0. And you're going to use your status to just put you down, right? So I haven't been able to confirm it. However, I would not be surprised if it did get said, even if it was just to say it. But what I would add there at the end to just conclude this, the likelihood of Pedro La Vega playing for Argentina is very slim. I know he's a young player, but in Argentina, things are different. And if you're not playing for Manchester United or Manchester City, it is very rare that a guy like Thiago Almada gets called up because he's in Atlanta United. So it's happened before, but Thiago Almada had this profile, this sort of light about him being this prospect that was going to be huge, one that maybe Pedro doesn't have, or that he doesn't have in terms of main Argentinian fan base and media. So the likelihood was very, very small. And that's why it'd be kind of odd for, that to be a thing of importance. Not to mention the fact that, as you said, how much does Messi really care about Pedro La Vega being part of, not being part of the national team? I don't know how much weight that would have.
Yeah, and I guess the other thing, at least from, correct me if I'm wrong, but at the very least, it sounds like Pedro de la Vega's camp is at the very least taking the position that they don't actually think that Messi is actively trying to get him kept from the Argentinian national team. Like whatever he said on the field, whatever he said after the game, it's banter, it's what it is, and they don't think that there is a shadow network working against them to keep them from the national team. And then presumably if Pedro's is not on the verge of being called into the Argentinian national team based off of what he's done the last couple of months, but if he plays the way that he's been playing the last couple of months, he's probably going to end up getting sold to a European team. And if he continues to play the way that he is, he's going to get back into the national team. Now,
right.
I suspect he knows like these are things that like Pedro is a smart guy. He's not a child who is easily hurt. So I guess what my take on this is Messi, I guess maybe does his research. He knows about his opponents. He uses that. He may use that in trash talk, but like it's also trash talk. Like I also was trying to like just dig around a little bit to ask some former players, like, what's the worst thing anyone's ever said to you? And most of them were like, I don't really remember because it's not something that I think about that often. Like it's not a thing that stays with me that long. And I will say the one surprising thing from this is that Alan Gordon, a former player, was the person who broke this story, because you would think he would have been like,
and I don't know how. I don't know how I tried when I first heard it. I tried to figure out how or who he knew, which I'm guessing it could have been something that someone heard Messi say, but I just didn't know how he fit in the equation. I mean, I really don't know. I don't know how many ties he has to the Sounders. I don't know how many ties he has to Pedro. That sounds even more far-fetched. Again, I'm not saying that it didn't happen. I'm just saying that at first I thought, I was like, where is he getting it from? But you're right. There is a code. There's a code as well. I mean, it's not just the players don't remember, but there's also codes of players not saying things that happen on the field, right? I can tell you that, there's been times where obviously away from the mics and in a completely different setting, players do talk about that sort of thing. And, you'd be surprised what's said or what's done. In South America, there's things like, you grab someone's like genitals and, there's all kinds of stuff that you do within the game that you don't necessarily talk about later, unless it becomes a situation like Zinedine Zidane headbutting somebody in the chest because of what was said. Then all of a sudden you kind of have to open that kind of worms. But if it's just like this, you're not going to see a player take that seriously or bring it out. And if it does, it usually doesn't tend to fit well for the player exposed in that sort of conversation.
Yeah, no, I would agree with you there. And I think it makes sense to me if you're Pedro de la Vega, you don't want your name associated with this. You don't want to be involved in this. You like, if people want to get on Messi, keep me out of it. I don't want to be the person who is the snitch, for lack of a better term.
Yes. Yes.
I can definitely appreciate how Messi or how Pedro wants to distance himself from this whole story. To be entirely fair to the sourcing on this, I personally have no doubt that this probably happened. I just don't know if it's that big of a deal, and I don't know if Pedro, like I can appreciate how Pedro just doesn't want to be involved, because he probably is not worried about it. What he is worried about is looking bad as a result of it, I think, and that is fair. And I hope this does not end up being something that's attached to him, because that would be unfair to him.
100%. I mean, you don't want to be the guy that said that Messi told you that you were going to be blacklisted from the national team and victimize yourself. And I mean, that's just all bad in all terms, both.
There's no upside.
At the professional level, no upside, zero upside, zero.
Yeah, absolutely. So anyway, moving into other stuff going on this week, it is kind of a an interesting little respite here that we have. We have a bunch of guys that get called into the national team. Christian Roldan was a late addition to the U.S. national team. And I will say that might be one of the cooler developments to come out of Leagues Cup, because I think that was probably tied to this, that the way he helped shut Messi down in that game, the way that he played throughout Leagues Cup, and really going all the way back to the Club World Cup, where he was very much a key component of limiting PSG, Botafogo, and Atletico Madrid. I'm really looking forward to hopefully seeing him get on the field for the national team and playing in a position where he is set up to succeed. Thank you for listening to the Sounder at Heart Podcast Network, which now includes No Sarietes, Lobbing Scorchers, and the Cooler Guild. Although this podcast is free, it's only made possible through our paid subscribers. Plans start as low as $30 a year and allow us to remain independent and mostly ad-free. Subscribers get access to all our written and podcast content, including a full-text RSS feed and a mostly ad-free podcast feed that includes every show in one spot. If you really like what we're doing, though, I'd encourage you to sign up at our higher tiers, which include all sorts of various perks. The most popular of those is our members-only Discord, where the real Sounders sickos hang out. I know I've called this group the smartest, funniest, and best-informed Sounders fans in the world, but it's more than the rough equivalent of a Sounders Mensa meeting. Discord is where we make things happen, like for real. You know the promotion the Sounders ran that offered fans the opportunity to trade in their Messi jersey for a Paul Rothrock one? That originated in our community. You'll not only be the first to know about stuff, but you also have a semi-direct line to the movers and shakers at the Sounders organization. If you want to be one of the totally normal people who occupy the Sounder at Heart Discord, just become a supporter of Sounder at Heart. Anyway, thanks for listening, and go Durs. No Sarietes, admittedly, is not exactly known for our spicy takes, but that doesn't mean we want our food to be mild. Spice up your life with Haxon Ferments. Handcrafted in Georgetown and made with the best local ingredients from across the Pacific Northwest, they specialize in unique small batch fermented hot sauces and vinegars. Haxon Ferments brings bold flavors and natural fermentation together for something truly special. Whether you're a heat seeker or just looking to elevate your cooking, you'll find something you love at haxonferments.com. That's HAXANFERMENTS.com. And right now, if you use the code Sounder at Heart, that's all one word, at checkout, you will get a free hot sauce with your order. Again, go to haxonferments.com, use the code Sounder at Heart at checkout for a free hot sauce with your order. Haxon Ferments is a proud sponsor of the Sounder at Heart Podcast Network.
I'm excited because despite all of the negative press and criticism that Pochettino has established since he became a coach, away from the results, it has been about calling more MLS players. And I think that is grossly overlooked a lot of times. Just playing in Europe doesn't necessarily mean that you are above the level of an MLS player, not because of the league, but just because of your form, just because of how much gameplay you're currently on, right? That's the whole reason why players move around other leagues, where maybe, yes, I'm not playing at AC Milan anymore, but now I'm getting more play time, right? And that is closely overlooked because we're in this like moment in time where, yes, this is the golden generation, and that's the golden generation because these players are, all of a sudden playing in the best leagues in the world, but playing is the big emphasis right there. Are they really playing, right? So for me, and obviously as someone who has some bias to him, I think that Christian Roldan has deserved a spot in the national team before. I don't think that there are true sixes that blow your mind in this Ewan Smith national team, especially when a guy like Musa is being used in other places, and he's more of an 8 or whoever it is that you think would go in that 6th position. I think that Christian Roldan as a dual winner, as a guy that can play defensively. And I know that he hasn't played that in the past because people got all over my comments. How many minutes has he gotten at the 6 for the U.S. national team? None, right? He's always played on the wing, or he's played a little bit higher, or whatever that might be. But this is a whole new coach. He's in a whole new other moment in his career. I think that he sees the game even better than he did before. He is a guy that physically can keep up and has shown you, proved to you that he can keep up with the best of the best at the highest level. And keep throwing stats at me that he has never had any goals for the U.S. national team. That's not the role that he's not going to play. He's going to play as a 6 that has a job to cover X amount of space, to play simple, to maybe get forward and help on the attack at times. But he is a player that can fit a role in a way that I don't know if anybody else can necessarily, specifically from this camp, right? Can you add more people? Is he going to have competition? Absolutely. But the fact that you were so upset that he's being called, that's what I have an issue with. Like, why are you so outraged of arguably the best 6 in your domestic league to get a call up? Come on.
The responses on Twitter to the announcement were like perfect. They were just so perfect. And I think one of the things that I'm always amazed at how often this gets brought up, that he's never scored a goal, as if somehow that's important. But he has about 1,500 minutes at the national team level. It is not that strange for a midfielder to go 1,500 minutes without a goal for anywhere. And, I guess he's played in some reasonably, some games where he was asked to be a little bit more offensive. He does have 3 assists. He in fact had assist at the Gold Cup, which was the last time he got called in. I just don't know what, I don't know. The whole fandom, the whole national team fandom is just such a strange thing to me, because it's like they are perpetually and almost exclusively looking for the next big thing. They're looking for the player to be sort of the American Messi, to be, and if they don't have that potential, if they don't have potential to be an absolute superstar, they just don't have time for it. They don't have interest in sort of building a roster or building a culture or trying to create a cohesive team. They just want to find the next guy who's going to score 100 goals for the U.S. And that's just not how this works.
They're literally role players that make great teams, right? I mean,
right.
Soccer is a team sport, and there are times where you might be better off with a guy that maybe doesn't have the biggest ceiling and cannot do everything, but can do 1 or 2 or 3 things extremely well. And that's going to fit to a system. And when you connect it together with other talented players, then it's amazing. But I laugh at all of these fans. I laugh at a lot of these influencers that talk about the importance of having these European players, because I've been there, done that. In Colombia, we were always the stepchild of South America. Then our players started getting to Europe, and it was all about bringing European players. And then when you realize that those European players weren't really working with the national team, then you're like, no, we got to get the guys that are playing domestically because they're still hungry. They're still there.
Right.
Colombia just called a 39-year-old striker by the name of Dairo Moreno, who had his best years a long time ago. He played here against the Sounders with Xolos a while back. That was his prime, but you called him at 39 because he's leading the league, and he led the Suramericana in goals for, a Colombian team, right? But the media and the fans were just like, we need this guy because these guys in Europe are not cutting it. So at some we need this MLS player now, and he has to come in because that's just the way of the world, man. So for me, I laugh about it. I think that a lot of people should look, and that's why Pochettino has gotten so much criticism, because he talked about sometimes you just got to look at the player and not the league that he's playing on. But it's a reality. It's a reality. Just look at the player, look at the system, look how he's going to work out, and forget about where he's playing.
Yeah, I would totally agree with that. And it's funny because even for all the struggling results that Pochettino has gotten, I actually do appreciate him to be implementing. Like he's just not, we're not used to having a coach like this who just is not as, he does not have any loyalty to any faction within the U.S. national team structure. He's here to do a job, and his job is to create the best team possible at the World Cup. His job is not to build a soccer program. It's not to, to win a PR battle. He's just here. He's a short timer who's here to do a job, and he's doing what he thinks is the right thing to do. And I find that his perspective is refreshing because he's not, he knows that he's going to get another job after this. The World Cup's going to end, and my suspicion is that the day after the World Cup ends, he will bid farewell to the U.S., and we will judge him exclusively on how successful he was at the World Cup. And that's fine. That's what I want. That's honestly what I want out of a national team coach, to set your team up the best way you know how, and to try, like, I don't need you to build a product. Like Berhalter was here for when he was first signed in 2018. He had a very different directive. We need you to rebuild the program. That is not what he is. What Poch is being asked to do. He's being asked to get us ready for next summer, and this is how he wants to do it. Let's see how it goes. It's like I love that. People are mad. I'm mad. I don't understand some of the call-ups, but I do at least trust that it's coming from an honest place of wanting to do the right thing and to be he has whatever his game plan is. I believe he has one. So I don't know. I'm curious to see how this goes. I'm really glad he called up Christian Roldan, and I have a feeling Christian Roldan is a kind of player that he'll like. Now he needs to call on Jackson Reagan too.
Hey man, sure, why not? I mean, you look at some of the open holes that this national team has, and if what you've been working with hasn't worked, why not look elsewhere? That's the crazy part. If this U.S. men's national team had been light out in every position, like, I'd get it, but
right.
You have holes, and why not bring some of these guys that are playing in your domestic league? In a league that's growing, a league that has national team players all around the world. It's not like you're, getting them from the Guatemalan league. I mean, no disrespect, or whatever. You're getting guys from a league that is a legit league. But let's stick to Christian Roldan. I think that he has the versatility that a national team coach would want. I think he has the experience, he has the heart, the commitment. He's a locker room guy, he's a team guy. But beyond that, look at his metrics. In a time where we love stats, where we love metrics, his metrics have to be up there with just the best. I mean, the amount of space that he covers, the amount of duels that he wins, the amount of key passes that he puts together from that position that doesn't necessarily ask a lot of that. I just think that Christian Roldan is a guy that has been snubbed in the past. I think he's been snubbed from a European dream. I think that he's been snubbed from times where he should have been more involved in the U.S. national team. And this is his time. If he's going to do it, it's going to be with a coach that has an open mind and he's not seeing things in a freaking funnel just because he wants to hear people be happy about calling European players. So I'm just excited for Christian. I'm excited for Christian. I think he deserves that. I think he's had a phenomenal year. And I think that if you give him a chance that he gets significant minutes, I think he's going to surprise more than one person.
Yeah, I do too. I just wanted him to get a shot because I do feel like this is sort of how he got into Greg Berhalter's good graces too, where it's like once he got in, it was very clear what he could do for the team and that he's a glue guy, that he's one of the people that people want to have around. And he's a good player. He's a really good player. And I think that's sometimes what gets overlooked is he is an excellent player. He is, for my money, one of the 2 or 3 best number 6s that the U.S. has in the whole player pool. And
I would agree.
He deserves this chance. It's as simple as that. All right. Anything else going on this week? We have a weekend off for the Sounders. Their next game is against the LA Galaxy. And then after that, Inter Miami on a midweek game in Miami. That should be interesting, although I fully expect Miami to be a little shorthanded for that game. But looking at the Sounders' schedule, there's still a lot to play for. And in the meantime, they actually got a result that really helped them because LAFC could have sort of had control of their destiny. And now the Sounders have control over the number 4 spot, meaning that if the Sounders win out, they will finish no worse than 4th. Whereas early, before LAFC dropped points in their last game, where they lost their last game, that LAFC could have potentially passed them because of the games in hand. But the Sounders, I think, got the only game on the schedule that looks really, really tough is that Miami game, just because it's on the road, it's midweek. Miami is a good team. But other than that, I feel like the Sounders have it set up pretty well here going down the stretch.
Yeah, no, I think you're spot on. I think it'll be, interesting how they harnessed everything that they've kind of lived through moving forward. It was interesting seeing Son not have, his best game, with LAFC. I think that a lot of times we just think that these players are just going to come and have perfect games all the time. And as much as that is a very good team, that's going to be one of the toughest teams that Seattle faces. And I think that the reasons why I have been very clear that, look, this was a fantastic win for the Sounders. It was a championship that, man, they're going to remember for the rest of their lives, but I wouldn't just put them as number 1 to win MLS, is because there's still a lot of teams out there that I don't know if they match up as well as what Seattle has faced lately. I think Seattle still has some things that are still to be determined. The kryptonite for the Sounders continues to be teams that bunker down and play off of the counter. How does that kind of work out? How do they match up against a team like San Diego that, just like the Sounders, have a very clear identity, that they play extremely quick soccer, very direct, that they do possess, but they can, off of a quick moment, just hit you on the counter, right? And that is in very good form. Vancouver and the way that they play at times with their 3-man backline. There's a lot of things that Seattle's going to have to decipher. But what I do know is that the team is in a position where there's so much confidence, there's so much cohesiveness that they can dare to dream. They can absolutely dare to dream. I think they're a heavy contender, without a doubt. And as long as once certain pieces start coming back, because I do expect Albert to be fully on once this break is over. We'll see where Jordan Morris is at. We'll see, obviously, what happens with Ryan Kent, who we saw jog and do some very minor stuff, but it was interesting to see him out on the field. So there's still some guys that are going to be able to come in. How do you deal with that? I think that's still to be determined. Obviously, Donnie Musovski has been on a heated streak. How do you implement Jordan at some point? I mean, there's some questions out there, but they're all good questions for the Sounders.
Hi, I'm Kristen Bell, and if you know my husband Dax, then you also know he loves shopping for a car. Selling a car? Not so much.
We're really doing this, huh?
Thankfully, Carvana makes it easy. Answer a few questions, put in your VIN or license, and done. We sold ours in minutes this morning, and they'll come pick it up and pay us this afternoon.
Bye-bye, Truckee.
Of course, we kept the favorite.
Hello, other Truckee.
Sell your car with Carvana today. Terms and conditions apply.
They are good questions. The Sounders are definitely in a situation right now where they have seemingly, they will soon have, or assuming they don't just have trade one injury for another, there is a very real possibility that they're going to end up with more good players than they can even put on the game day roster. And that's, it's a good problem to have. I mean, it is a problem on some level. And it's funny because you can only, like, it's tempting to go, well, maybe they don't need Albert Rusnak, but then it's like, well, let's be real. Albert was on the field for some very good performances. He was on the field for that 7-0 win. You you can say, oh, well, maybe they don't need Jordan Morris. But when Jordan Morris has played, he's been really, really good. People have kind of forgotten that because of how good De Rosario and Musovski has been. But Morris has done nothing to hurt himself other than get hurt. Like, he has not been bad by any stretch of the imagination. And you can kind of go down the list of injured players. And I think you can sort of argue that all these guys deserve to kind of get their spots back. But the guys who have been filling in have been so good in their spots. It's gonna be fascinating to see how Brian manages all this. And one other thing, I think one other takeaway I wanted to touch on, and that we maybe have not delved into so deeply in the post game, is Brian Schmetzer deserves a ton of credit for the way that he has managed this roster. He has always been pretty good about that aspect of it, even if you and I didn't always agree with the way he was doing it. But he does seem to have unlocked a different kind of player management where he is pushing all the right buttons when it comes to substitutions, when it comes to rotations. And that's really been satisfying to see. And I even, he's given you a hard time for giving him a hard time. But I think all of your criticisms, frankly, have been legit. And he has responded, whether conscientiously or not, and fixed a lot of the things that we felt were sort of blind spots for him.
Look, you bring up a great point, because I have been very open, and I never, ever, ever hold back punches. And by punches, I just mean my statements, what I say. I'm never going to say I didn't say that. There was a moment last year where I was not sure if Brian Schmetzer was the best guy for the job moving forward. I thought that his coaching had gone stale. I thought that he had one too many problems in the locker room. I felt like he had handled certain personal situations not in the best possible way. I thought that a lot of his tactics had kind of lost their spark. And I didn't know, this is the most important part, I had not even the most minimal sort of confidence that he could reinvent himself. And this year, he has done it. This year, as much as he'd love to say, and he felt so offended by the fact that he was called a defensive coach, that's always been his calling card. That's always been Brian Schmetzer ball. It's a team that was relentless, that, had grit, everything that he talks about, right? That we all know, that's Schmetzer ball. It wasn't that they were Wilfred Nancy grade on the offensive spaces and that they were so fluid and things like that. But he's really focused, emphasized from Marbella here on making this team more offensive. And he put wrinkles and he wanted to do things differently. And he's done it. So I think he's collecting the fruit of the work that he's put together. And that's credit to him. And I'm not afraid to say it. I had no confidence that he could do what he's done this year, but he's done it. From the way that he handles his substitutions, the amount of players in his rotation, and maybe you can, feel free to correct me, Jeremiah, but it feels like he's used so much more of his bench, of his depth, of his younger players that he's ever has this year. And it's all because he is absolutely pushing all the right buttons. And he's created an offense that's fun to watch. Look, my dad, he is a casual watcher of the Sounders. And he's like, oh, man, Dad, his son, I didn't know we had all these good players. I said, Dad, these are the same players I was telling you about in May. And he's like, oh, really? Well, they just move so well. The offense is so fun to watch. That's the things that you've created now. And this is a guy that, again, he would not know who are the new players, but he could definitely sit in front of a TV and tell you that in May, this team looked a lot different than he does today. And that's all credit to not just Brian, because Brian deserves a lot of it, but Freddie Juarez, Preki, who's a name that consistently comes up whenever you ask a young player, hey, who has done it for you? Who's really helped you? Preki always comes up. Freddie Juarez is a guy that's watching the game upstairs, comes down, gives you notes. The guy that's working with the guys on the field. Andy Rose defensively with every single one of these players, Kim Kehi, Yamar, Reagan, all your defensive players, they have nothing but great things to say about Andy Rose. Tommy Dutra, that as we've talked before, he just has a basement full of goalkeepers. That is exactly what has this team where they are now. They have an identity. They know what they're playing for, and they feel like they can do it with any team. But that's credit to the coaching staff, but mainly, especially for me, Brian Schmetzer has truly surprised me this year. And I would say that after covering him since 2016 when he was an interim head coach, this is the best coaching job that I've seen him do, because this is the one team that doesn't have the magic of Olodero, that doesn't have the goal scoring or three juggernauts of Jordan, Niko and Raul, or didn't have the Clint Dempseys. He's doing it with a very good, talented group, but a group that collectively just, man, makes you want to sit down and watch the game. I've watched the final 4 times. 4 times I've watched it. And I'm still just impressed of how they bracketed Messi and how every single person, Pedro, Christian, Obed, Reed, would have this permanent look on Messi. Whenever Messi was open on top of the 18, it was Jackson and Yamar pushing forward. I mean, man, I've watched the game 4 times, and every time I come just amazed of how good the tactics were and how well executed they were. So I'm not afraid to applaud Brian Schmetzer. Have him take his victory lap. If he wants to come at me and tell me, oh, you didn't believe, he could say it. Because again, I'm a man that I say what I feel what I say. I walk the walk, talk the talk, and he surprised me, man. And that's credit to him.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting the way he sort of got around the I'm a defensive coach thing was to say, I just ask that all my players defend first. And I guess
exactly
and I guess there's part of it where he can go, and that's what I'm still asking them to do. And I guess that's true. But
absolutely,
he does seem to have loosened the reins in terms of the like he's willing to take a lot more risks this year. He is he's someone that it takes something to win him over. He's not someone who is willing to just believe someone on faith. He wants to see it. He wants to see players earning their spots in training. But and so I don't know. It's a little chicken and egg, I suppose, to say, well, this year he's doing it, but maybe it's because the players have just done a better job of earning it. I don't know. But either way, he deserves credit for building this roster, for using it in an effective way. Even times this year, I have wondered whether or not he was managing things. But as we sit here right now, 2/3, 3/4 of the way through the season, I am with you. I think this is the best job that he's ever done. If the coach of the year vote were right now, I would vote him coach of the year without any sort of second thoughts. I think he's done an amazing job, and he deserves all the credit that he's getting. And I hope he's enjoying it. And if he wants to keep viewing you and I as sort of thorns in his side, that's fine. And we're willing to take it. I think that's part of what makes this, that's what part of this is, right? Is we say stuff and we show up to training and we let the coaches come back at us, And I think that's a key component of this whole ecosystem. And don't let Brian convince you otherwise. I think deep down he respects and appreciates the pressure that you especially put on him. And I would like to think he feels the same way about me. I think he feels the same way about Sounder at heart and sort of keeping the Sounders organization honest. And we are on, we're on their side, but we aren't following them blindly. We're not just taking everything they say as gospel. We are reporting, we are doing our due diligence, and we're trying to give as accurate of a picture as possible, because we all want the same thing, which is for this organization to be successful. We want them to be popular. We want fans to come out, but we also don't believe that blowing smoke up of anyone's ass is going to help in that cause.
Yeah, and I love that you said that because look, he makes me doubt it. A lot of times I feel like he wishes I had stubbed my toe on a rock multiple times. But at the same time, and I've said it before, man, this is what I love about what we do is that I try to prepare myself and conduct my way in a manner that if you were to pull up a show from 5 months ago, you could hear consistency in my statement. And I don't know if you remember this, but there was a point where in this show I said, look, if I got to be Brian Schmetzer's Drago picture on the mirror, that he's just like, F this guy, I got to prove him wrong because he's preparing in front of the freaking mirror and he's got the picture of the doubter there, then I'll be Drago in your mirror because I have no problem with it because I do want this team to do well. I never hide my biased way. I have an affiliation to the team, and obviously I do that in the most objective way when it comes to coverage, when it comes to content, when it comes to when I call the radio games, although we do 1360, which a lot of times is okay to be the homer on it, but I still handle myself to the standard that I like to keep myself in. But that does not mean by any way that people don't know. I mean, look at the flag behind me. I mean, I don't hide it. I mean, I do affiliate with the Sounders. That is the team that I want to watch. That aside from my childhood team Nacional, who's also green, this is the other green that I follow. That's just the way it is. But I'm always going to hold them to the highest standard, and I'm always going to be real, man. So I'm just excited for the time that we live in. I was just blessed to see Seattle give out that image from the atmosphere of the 69,000 plus to the fact that I was able to go on radio in Colombia and Argentina and say that most of the players in that game that participated had either played for Tacoma Defiance, been part of the academy, or were kids from Seattle was great because not a lot of teams can say that. And that's what this team has kind of put together, right? And that does not mean that I'm never going to want more and I'm never going to not criticize and all of these things, but I can absolutely enjoy it. And I think that's something the fans should enjoy as well.
I agree with you there. It was a great advertisement for the Sounders. And to just circle back to the thing where we started, I do think that it ends up being the fact that all the attention got paid to the fight does sort of in a broad sense illustrate what's going on here as a positive thing overall, that there was so much energy, there was such a big crowd, that the tension was so high. I'm sure a lot of people thought the Sounders won the league. That was the sort of treatment this was all given. And hopefully the Sounders can ride some of that momentum. I talked about this on No Sarietas yesterday, but one of the things that was a bummer that happened in 2019 is they had this MLS Cup and then COVID happened. So they didn't really get to carry a lot of that momentum. In 2022, it was so early in the season that there was time for it to completely unravel. And so by the time 2023 came around, people were more up in their feelings about missing the playoffs than they were excited about winning 2022 Champions League. That can obviously still happen. I don't think that's what's going to happen. The Sounders are going to make the playoffs. Hopefully they'll make a good run. And there's going to be a lot of good feelings. Like this has the potential to have a lot of good feelings carrying into not just the offseason, but into next season. And so hopefully this is a turning point I feel like in the last few years, really since they won Champions League, there's just been this sort of internal fight in terms of the way the Sounders want to be run and the way that the fans sort of view the team. We've seen a lot of price increases since then. Right now, they just came out with season ticket prices. They're effectively stable. They aren't just, they're down.
Shooting them up.
They're not shooting them up. There's
Nice.
a few new perks that season ticket holders get. So this is, I think, some real positive. It feels like a real positive time. And I hope that we're able to carry this momentum into 2026. And I guess that's kind of where I'll leave my bit.
No, I think it's great. And just the general sense that this team, has built what they have. It's credit to everybody, right? You kind of see it as when Brian Schmetzer got really emotional about this is like an organizational win, and he credited Adrian and everybody. That's heartfelt. That's very true. And I think that both you and I have been critical of Craig, have also given him his flowers, been critical of Brian. Now we're giving him his flowers. It is something that happens because there's a standard. Look, I'll be real brief with this, but I did a show with Glenn. Oh my goodness, I just had him. Glenn Davis in Houston. He has an ESPN show in Houston. And he wanted me to come in and just talk about the Sounders culture, because he's a guy that's down there fighting by himself with the front office to figure out what it is that's wrong with Houston Dynamo, a team that apparently cannot get people going to the stadium, that they spend all this money in transfers, but they can't seem to win. There's no culture, there's no academy, there's no anything. And he's over there being extremely critical, going right at the front office, something that, you and I both know well about. And he just talks so great about the Sounders. He's like, man, I wish that I was there. I wish that we had something even similar to that, because the bar is so high, So you guys are criticizing because the bar is up here, and I'm criticizing when the bar is low.
Right.
And we can even meet that. We can even meet the bar that's low. So the Sounders have set the bar at the highest level because they're a winning franchise. They're a franchise with the best fans in MLS, and they have to uphold that, right? But I love to talk about just having a little bit of insight into what other clubs are feeling, because it does bring perspective to things, and it makes you cherish even more what we have here in the Pacific Northwest.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I feel like one of the things that gets lost, and I think that this is what got illustrated most vividly in the Sounders Miami game, is that the Sounders haven't taken any shortcuts. This has been a long process. You can accuse them of a lot of things. You can accuse them of being cheap. You can accuse them of making some bad decisions, but they aren't looking for shortcuts. They aren't looking to how to circumvent the way that this all works. Because even back in 2009, part of why they were so successful coming out of the gates is because they had been building. This has been part of a project that has been building since 1974. At the very least, you would say it started in 2001 when Adrian Hanauer took over ownership of the USL team, or took over control of the USL team. And the Sounders, at each and every stop, it's been very incremental. It's been one step at a time. They are very good in the USL, and then they get to MLS, and they don't win right away. Not that they wouldn't have loved it, but I do think it's important in this whole thing that it wasn't until year 7 that the Sounders won their first MLS Cup. And I think it was good for them to have to go through some struggles and to go through some introspection and to wonder if they had gotten ahead of themselves before they get that first MLS Cup. And it's been just progressive ever since then. And I think that's what I love about following this team, is that it feels sustainable, that it feels like there's a real core here, that there are real roots in the community. And I think anyone who's being honest about what Miami is doing is they are trying to supercharge all of it. They're trying to fast track themselves into relevancy. They're trying to fast track themselves into being a super club, into being the Real Madrid sort of the United States. And it's tough to do it that way. And I think what they're seeing right now is that it comes with some, you cut corners and you end up with things like this, where you have a Luis Suarez or a Sergio Busquets or even a Messi, who I don't think entirely respect the organization, because they think they're above it. They think they think they're calling the shots. And so, I guess we'll see. Who knows? Maybe Miami goes and wins MLS Cup, and we're having a very different conversation here in a few months.
Hell no.
It doesn't seem that that's likely.
I say that they don't. I think there's a better chance that the Sounders go off and get to the MLS final than for Miami to get to the MLS final. I think that they have been found. They have been studied, and there is a blueprint on exactly how to attack that team. I've said it once, twice, 1,000 times. Rodrigo de Paul doesn't mean that you're going to win it all. And as much as he does provide you with some upside, he does not cover all the holes that team has. In the East, there's too many good teams. I just don't see him getting out of the East. I do not see them going out of the East. I would put money on the fact that they don't even make it to the final of the Eastern Conference.
Yeah. I mean, you might be right. The East looks pretty tough. I would much rather be in the Sounders' shoes right now than,
absolutely,
than Miami's. No question about that. Well, let's call it. Niko, thank you for hopping on here and doing a impromptu hour-long show.
And I'm happy to do it, man.
We started off, I don't know what we're going to talk about. And then the Leagues Cup stuff came, and then it just started rolling. So
that's
Niko,
what I love about the way we move, man, Jeremiah. I've told you dozens of times, man, I think that if, me and you just start just chopping it up, that's how we kind of started this whole thing. I think when I kept telling you, me and you will just sit there and talk by the car and at Starfire parking lot for like an hour. So I was like, why don't we just put it on tape? So I love it. I hope that the audience loves it. I do want to give a shout out to all the audience, all the positive input that you guys have, even the bad feedback. I absolutely love it. Thank you to everybody for listening. This is why we do it, man. I love that you guys enjoy it. And we're going to continue to stay consistent with the times and the Fridays, and making sure that you guys have some sort of content at the end of the week.
Absolutely. Well, with all that said, I want to sign off for Niko Moreno. You can find him on Blue Sky El Rolo NW. You can find him on YouTube at Pulso Sports, at Soccer Down Here, at Lobbing Scorchers. And of course, you can find him on Sounder at Heart. I am Jeremiah Oshan. This is No Sadietas, part of the Sounder at Heart podcast network. And we will catch you next time.
Let's go Sounders.
If you're a maintenance supervisor at a manufacturing facility and your machinery isn't working right, Grainger knows you need to understand what's wrong as soon as possible. So when a conveyor motor falters, Grainger offers diagnostic tools like calibration kits and multimeters to help you identify and fix the problem. With Grainger, you can be confident you have everything you need to keep your facility running smoothly. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.